All right, let's get started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Hai Nguyen. I'm co-founder of Affluence, the company behind Matrix. Thank you so much for joining our webinar on Introduction to Matrix. Hopefully, when you get out of this webinar, you'll get some ideas and get excited about how to use Matrix to prioritize your tasks, your emails, and just be more effective at communicating your goals and what it is that you're trying to do within your own work. I want to let you know that this webinar is recorded and we'll share the recording with everyone afterwards. And then also there's a chat section. So if you have any questions whatsoever during the webinar, please send me a message right there. And then right after my presentation and product demo, I'd be happy to address those questions. Couple of goals today. I want to make sure that you'll be able to, again, understand the basics of Matrix. With that, I want to talk about the challenges that I've seen our customer face. There are three challenges that are recurring. One, team members have trouble understanding what's priority right now. And then second, it is getting harder and harder to keep track on the status of work when you have so many areas of responsibilities. And then thirdly, emails and meetings are just causing far too much context switching. Now, if any of these problems resonate with you, it just shows that actually it is so prevalent across everything that we do. And despite all the software application that's been deployed by our organization over the last couple of years, I think it's actually getting harder and harder to be on top of things. So Priority Matrix is a comprehensive email, priority, and project management software that helps at three different levels. At the individual level, it helps you prioritize your most important task in email. At the team level, it helps everyone stays aligned on key projects. The idea is that if you use Matrix, you will be able to understand exactly what the priorities are for every single one of your project and every single one of your team members. And that's the ultimate goal. If you walk away from today's webinar and you go to Matrix and you actually achieve these goals that I mentioned, then I think that you'll find value within the software really quickly. And then lastly, at the organization level, Matrix creates a single source of truth to help you become more effective and more efficient. What happens is that as you use Matrix, the software actually keeps track of all the changes that you have, all the changes in the priorities, all the changes in the task. And then what's powerful about this is that when someone leaves the organization, when someone moves on to something else, or when you have new hires, they're actually able to catch up and understand how everything fits together much more rapidly. And that's the value at the organizational scale. So what makes Matrix better than other solution is that we're the only software that's Microsoft 365 security certified in the Teams app, Outlook app, and web app. Not only that, one of the areas that we're investing a lot of time and effort in is in using AI to help you achieve your specific goals. Now, I know that there's a lot of skepticism around AI, which I think is completely understandable. But one of the things that I'm really particularly excited about is how do we actually leverage AI to help us come up with ideas on how to achieve specific tasks that we have. And so that's one of our focus on investment in the product. And Matrix also provide what I call people-centric collaboration. It's not just about projects. And so you've probably used 1,000 to-do list software. Every single person that's here today, I would not be surprised if you've looked at so many different software to ways to prioritize your to-do list, your task, and so forth. The reason is people like you are here because you're looking to become more effective and more efficient. And because of that, you're constantly looking for ways to improve yourself. And so, I'm not surprised that, or I would not be surprised that you've looked at so many different systems. So one of the things that makes Matrix unique is that, we look at it from the perspective of prioritization, right? It's not just about tasks, it's not about projects. So prioritization means you need to understand how everything fits together within the bigger picture. And part of that is actually looking at people and seeing what are the things you have to do for others. What are the things that you're responsible for your manager across all of your projects, everything, as opposed to just one thing at a time. And so I'll show you some of that capabilities as well. And then finally, Priority Matrix is available as a standard SaaS solution, which is what I'll be showing. But we also have a HIPAA compliant solution for healthcare and life sciences, as well as an Azure government cloud solution for state and local government. Of course, for some of our enterprise customers, we have private Azure deployments if that's necessary. If any of these other solution interests you, feel free to reach out to me, hi@affluence.com or support@affluence.com, and we'd be happy to walk you through those. So what makes Priority Matrix particularly effective as a software is that it helps you determine what needs to be done now, what needs to be done later, and what are the things you should delegate. And one thing that I want everyone to admit, because I think it's so important, is that priorities are constantly shifting, right? Today, your priorities might be X. Tomorrow, your priority might be Y. And it's not because, people's mind change or whatever. It's just the world's so dynamic. And if you're working on multiple projects, you have to be ready to adapt. And so Priority Matrix offers the one place where everyone can go to know what needs to be done. Now, you've probably seen this so many cases in so many scenarios where you have coworkers where all their priorities, everything that they want to do, everything that they need to do is all in their head. Well, that's fantastic. It's there. The only problem is if they're not present or they're not in the meeting or they're off work because of sickness or whatever, then what are you working on? How do you know what to take on and what to delegate? And how do you actually streamline that entire process? And so one thing that I recommend when you think about Priority Matrix, think of it as a way to see what everyone's priorities are. And instead of having it in their head, have it down on something that's tangible. So when you walk around the office, you can essentially see this floating box above their head that show everyone's priorities within the bigger picture. And that's how you create alignment. Let's talk about the philosophy behind Priority Matrix. So there's a famous quote attributed to former President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." What I really like about this quote is that instead of looking at a to-do list, you take all those things that you have to do, and you look at from the perspective, the dimensions of importance and urgency. Now, you've probably heard the phrase important and urgent versus important and not urgent and so forth many times. Well, imagine if you take out a piece of paper right now, write down the 50 things you have to do or 25 things you have to do. If you look at that list, where do you start? Do you start at the top? Do you start at the bottom? Do you start somewhere random in the middle, right? And then at the same time, if you have to add task, where do you add it? Do you add it to the top of the list or bottom of the list? So what happens is that we tend to be pulled by the things that are urgent rather than the things that are important. And the reason for that is the urgent are the things that are actually the last thing in, right? The last email that we got is the first email you typically respond to. And by the way, I'm guilty of that too. When I check my emails, I get hundreds of emails per day. When I look at my emails, guess what? I'm looking at the email that's at the very top of the list. And so that's the one I respond to. And so we are all pulled by these forces that actually cause us to focus on the urgent things rather than the important things. So instead of having a to-do list, what you want to do is you want to have a matrix with the tasks organized into the do now, which are essentially the important and urgent, right? These are either the fires you have to fight or the tasks you really should be focusing your time on. And then important but not urgent, that's the plan quadrant. These are the things where if you have excess capacity, that's what you should be thinking about. That's the stuff that should be processed within the back of your brain. And then what are the things that are not important but urgent that you could delegate out? And this is why we have executive assistant. This is why we have outsourcing firms. This is why we have others who might be more suited towards achieving those tasks. And so what are the things we can delegate? And then finally, you obviously should not write down anything that's not important or not urgent. Instead, you have the inbox, which is where you sort of have the repository of all the ideas that you have. And this, in a nutshell, at the most basic level, is what Priority Matrix software is all about. Instead of having a to-do list, you have a matrix with all your priorities on it, and then taking this and being able to communicate this to the rest of your team. So I want to emphasize that Priority Matrix is a communication tool for that purpose. It helps you take all that stuff out of your brain and all the stuff out of your manager's brain and all of your direct reports brain, put it down to something that is visual, easy to see. And when you have a meeting and you project Priority Matrix on the big screen, you guys are in alignment just like that. So the 4-quadrant Eisenhower Matrix creates alignment because it forces you to prioritize from the beginning. And in fact, I would say that that's one of the hardest things about using the Matrix software, which is when you create the task, you have to decide where it goes. You can't just go and just say, hey, this is the list of things we have to do. You have to consciously make that decision. And here's the interesting part. Success from using Matrix isn't necessarily about finding what everyone agrees on. It's about discovering disagreements on what should be a priority, but when it isn't. And let me explain why. If you are constantly aligned, perfectly aligned with all your coworkers every single day, every single month, every single quarter, then you don't need a software like ours. In fact, you just go and work on the things you have to work and you're good. But what happens is that we never have that full alignment. And so Matrix makes it where when you write down your priorities and you're walking around the office and you're comparing notes, you'll start surfacing up discrepancies. And that's where it's really interesting. And if we can help you find one key initiative that should be a priority, but for some reason it's not, or vice versa, then I think you'll find that you've achieved a ton of value out of Matrix, and every dollar you've ever spent on it, every hour you've ever invested in it is worth it. So with that, I want to jump into the product itself because I want to show you how to actually apply it and how to use it. The goal here is to show you a simple version. The most basic features of the software and how to get 80% of the value with 20% of the work. I do want to mention that the webinars are recorded, and so they are on affluence.com/webinars, and I'll send out that information afterwards so you can watch this webinar as well as other webinars on email management as well as using templates and so forth. As mentioned, if you have questions during the webinar, please send them in the chat and I'd be happy to look at them. With that, I'm jumping over to our software. And so you should be able to see here on my screen, I have the web application of Matrix open. As you can see, front and center is the 4 quadrants, right? Do now, do later, delegate, and inbox. And so when you create a task in Matrix, you really are choosing within this matrix where something goes. So let me give you an example. Let's just say I want to follow up with webinar participants, right? That's a very simple task, which is something that I will do after this call. Follow up with webinar participants. And then instead of actually just creating that task, I'm going to go ahead and say due at 2 p.m. and I'll click add. So when I click add for something like that, what happens is it creates a task. And now what's called the item details opens in Matrix. The item details is where I can add additional information on the task. Again, if you use to-do list, various to-do applications or project management application, you've seen this over and over again, right? The difference is down here on the right-hand side, you can actually do a couple of things. One, you can start a task. And so when you start a task, what it does is it actually flags it here with a little icon and it goes to the top of the list. And so within the quadrants themselves, you might have tasks that are active. So I like to start things that I'm actively working on, so then it's very easy for me to find. And then at the same time, when I start, I actually get reports around the status of those tasks, and that might be very useful for those who actually want to be on top of all their key tasks. And then below that, you have icons. When you click on here, you get to choose some icon that you might want to associate with the task. One of the things I like to do, the 2 types of icons I generally recommend are the numbers and the colors. So numbers is a good way to represent priorities. And my general recommendation is you use something like 1, 3, or 9. You don't want to go down the rabbit hole of deciding whether something is a 5 or a 6 and so forth. Then your brain's spending far too much time on that. Instead, if something that's low priority, set it to 1. Something that's very high priority, set it to 9, right? So then it's very easy to decide, is this something at 3 or 9? And then the other is the color around red, yellow, and green. Of course, sometimes we want to make it very visual so then we can communicate to others that, by the way, this is on schedule or not. So I'll go ahead and make it green. And then down below that in item details, you have a lot of other information you can add. Ownership. Every task in Matrix has an owner, right? And if you only have one owner, you can't have multiple owners. The idea is that you want to make sure that whoever it is responsible knows exactly what it is they're responsible for. But one of the things you can do is you can always have followers, which are additional people who might want to be updated on the task itself. So as an example, if I create a task and I delegate to a colleague, well, I want to be a follower to that task. So then when that task gets updated or finished or changed in status, or if that colleague responds to the task, then I'll get a notification for it. So I'll give you an example here. I'm going to go ahead and assign to another person. You see now their avatar takes over, so they're the owner, and it shows up here in the quadrant as well. Very visual. And then at the same time, I'm still a follower. So when this task gets finished, I'll get a notification. Next to that, you have progress, efforts, due dates, and reminders. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time on reminders because I think that due dates and reminders are two of the most powerful capabilities that you can use in Matrix to ensure that you work on the most important tasks. If you want to think about prioritization, and if you think about importance and urgency, yes, the quadrant is very good to determine importance, but urgency, to determine urgency, you need to know time. So therefore, I recommend every time you have something that's important, set due dates and set reminders. The difference between due dates and reminders is the following. Let's just say you have taxes due April 15th, right? Great. April 15th comes around, the task says, hey, this is due. Well, guess what? You're not going to get that done because you need to do all this other stuff ahead of time. So what you want to do is might want to set a reminder a month prior. So then you'll get a reminder in Matrix to actually get started on it. So here's how I like to do it. When I have a due date, since I already have a due date here at 2 p.m., what I'm going to say at the bottom here, I'm going to type in the chat because, again, Matrix uses natural language to process this stuff. So I can say, remind me daily. So now on a daily basis, I'll get a reminder to follow up with this task if I don't get it done today. So then, because I've set this due date for today at 2 p.m., imagine if I forget for whatever reason, well, tomorrow I'll get a notification from Matrix that says, hey, by the way, you have this task and you didn't get it done. So make sure you do it. So I love the recurring reminders because what it does is it comes back to you onto your alerts every single day or every single week. So you could type here, remind me monthly, remind me weekly. You could type remind everybody daily, everybody weekly. And so what it does is it sends everyone who's a follower or an owner a message. This, by the way, is how you trick your brain into working on the important task, right? As I mentioned to you, that last email in is the one that you typically respond to. But imagine if whenever you check your email, your most important email, right, pop to the top of the list every single day, every single week, right? And you might have something that's due in 3 months. You don't want it on your list every day, but once a month, you want it to pop to the top of your list. So then you're like, oh, hey, that's top of mind. Let me think about that, or let me start working on that. The same thing applies to tasking Matrix with reminders. So by setting recurring reminders, again, on a monthly basis or whatever, I never forget the most important tasks that I have. And I do that for everything that is critical for me. So down here, you have the chat section. This is where you can create messages and you can actually talk to your coworkers just like any other chat. You know, imagine if with inside teams or whatever, you can think of it as like a thread for communication, but it's within the context of the task, right? When you have a conversation in teams, you're talking about all sorts of stuff. So therefore, you know, later on, if you need to review the decisions made or context, just to have context, you're going to lose that because that information is scattered everywhere. Instead, by having the conversation within the item chat, you can have that context. So when you have a new person coming in to take a look at the item, they know exactly what you guys have talked about. The note section is pretty simple. It's just where you can add subtask and bullets. It's not intended to be rich text because, you know, you can use Microsoft Word or Google Docs for that. With the resources section, that's where you can attach files, documents, photos. For example, if you use Matrix on your phone and, you know, you have some field workers and they get some work done, they can actually take a picture using the Matrix app and it uploads to the item itself. So imagine if you have a task and that task might be to fix something at a certain location, right? When that work is done, the team member can actually take a picture and now you have it as part of the record inside Matrix. So that's a really powerful way to do record keeping. And then not only that, you can actually attach emails, you can attach SharePoint, and you can actually link tasks together inside Matrix. So I'll show you some of those real soon as well. So that's essentially the item level. So whenever you have a task, again, you might want to add some of these information, but as I mentioned, the most important thing for your most important task is the due date and the reminders. Now, let's just say I created this task here. What I want to make sure I do is I want to move to quadrant 1. I can just drag and drop it, and now it's in quadrant 1. Now, let's talk about projects. What are projects? Inside Matrix, project, you can think of a project as essentially one of these 4-quadrant board, right? So every matrix itself is a project. Now, project can come in many different flavors. You might have a personal priority project, which is what I open here, but you might have a project for team priorities. So team priorities might be something that you have all your direct coworkers on, and you have one central place to see what everyone's priorities are. You might have a project for every client you work with. So for example, if you're an architecture firm, you might have an architecture project for every client. Or if you're working with external parties, you might do the exact same thing. As long as each of those projects have their own priorities list, they deserve their own project. For us, we have projects also for each of our software application. So for example, our iPhone app would have a project, our Teams app would have a project, because within each of those, we have ongoing priorities that we're constantly prioritizing and shifting and getting things done. One of the things that I like to do, especially, it's only February, right? So you should have goals for 2024. So for example, I have a project called Goals for 2024. Within it, I actually changed the quadrant name to long-term goals, short-term goals, things I will not do, and ideas. And then I actually write down my goals. And here's another trick. Set recurring reminders on your goals. So the reason why so many of us fail at at fulfilling our annual goals is on that first day, right? January 1st, you're gung-ho, you're like, I'm going to get all these things done. And then what happens is that life takes over and you kind of forget, because now, again, you have all those other urgent things. So by using Party Matrix and by writing down your goals within these various quadrants and then setting the recurring reminders on a monthly basis, it'll pop to the top of your alerts and you're like, okay, you know what? I said I was going to read that new business book monthly. Let's make sure I get it done. And so this is a really good trick. If you want to make sure that you're successful this year, try this. Okay. Now, when I have a project selected, on the right-hand side is the project details. So instead of item details, it's a project details. Same thing, you have the name of the project, which you can click on here to change. Next to the project name, you have the star. If you click on star, it pops it to the top of the list. Again, I like to star projects that are active. Now, I have around 10 star projects. I have around 300 plus project total in my work account and like 10 star projects or so. So that allows me to really easily just look at the project that are active and jump to the project that I need, whereas the rest of the projects, I don't have to worry about them. So Party Matrix is designed to handle vast amount of data, vast number of projects across your entire organization. So you never have to worry about that. You can do thousands of projects and Party Matrix can handle all of that because you can actually tag projects, you can archive projects and so forth as well. Below that, you have team members. This is where you can actually invite appropriate people to your project. So for example, again, if you have a team project, right, then you might have your 5 or 10 intermediate coworkers. If you're a manager, you want to invite all your direct reports. If you're someone who reports to somebody else, you can actually just invite your manager so then they can see your team priorities. So that's sort of one of the ways that you can use the membership. Now, the group is essentially, you can think of it as departments. So let's just say if you have a marketing team where a marketing project would have all the marketing people in it, that's how you would set groups. Now, within the quadrant themselves, you can change the quadrant name. As you can see, that's what I did here. You just click on this and change the quadrant name. You can click on this to change the color. I like using the colors as a way to color code different types of projects. So for example, maybe you have marketing projects or external projects or customer success or engineering, right? So maybe some of those color coding, again, makes it a little bit more visual. That doesn't affect the functionality of the software. It's just a way for you to communicate. Okay, so that's the project details. There's a couple things that I want you to explore later on when you're using Party Matrix, which is this top right menu here. When you go to here, you'll see that we have a lot of options you can work with. One of those options is actually save the project as a template. Let's just say if you use Party Matrix to have a employee onboarding process, right? What that means is you're in HR, you have an employee, whenever you have a new employee, they have to go through 15 tasks as part of training. You create a Party Matrix along with these are your tasks for week 1. These are your tasks for month 1. These are the resources and files and documents, links, and so forth. You can create that list of items inside a Protomatrix project, save it as a template. And then when you have a new employee, you just launch a project from template instead of from scratch and having to recreate all of it. This will save you a tremendous amount of time. And not only that, all you have to do is set the start date, and then the rest of the due date is built out by Protomatrix for you automatically. So if you have recurring processes, this will save you a lot of effort. As you can see, there's other options for exporting to CSV, importing CSV, etc. But let me show you how to create a project. So we talked about project just now. So when you go to click on project here, right, you can click on create project. When you create project, you have several options. The first, of course, is just a blank project. Now you go in here, you can type the project name, you can choose a template. So when I said the do now, do later, the Eisenhower Matrix, that's just the basic Protomatrix template. At the same time, the beauty about a 2x2 matrix is you can have infinite types of projects. Like you have so many different dimensions, effort versus impact, right? Or you can use the GTD method, or you can use stuff that you learn in business school, strength, weakness, opportunity, threats. And so anything that has 4 quadrants, you can do with Protomatrix. We have a couple of other templates that you can use. So what that means is it allows you to use Protomatrix for everything from your strategic to your tactical work, whether you're an executive or an independent contributor. So you can choose that, and then you can actually choose a color theme. Again, that's how you create a project from scratch. But you can also create a project from using one of your existing templates. So earlier I showed you, or I explained to you, how you can save an employee onboarding process as a project template. Well, that shows up right here. So when you have a new employee, you just launch one of these instead. Of course, we have AI that you can leverage to create projects based on your goals. For example, let's just say if one of your goals is to get a promotion this year, simply type, I want to get promoted, or get promoted to senior project manager, and click next. And Protomatrix will actually build out a series of tasks to help you achieve that goal. Pretty neat capability. It's not designed to be perfect, but what it'll do is help you get a head start compared to everyone else who's not using Protomatrix. Okay, so that's how you create projects. So I've explained to you so far how to create projects, how to customize projects, how to create tasks, how to customize tasks, right? And I want to emphasize again the most important things that you should do. 1, you should have a project for personal priorities. You should have a project for team priorities, and you should have a project for key initiatives that you might have, a project for your goals, and then if you work with external clients or project whatever, a project for each of those. Within each project, make sure you invite the appropriate people, right? Maybe your personal project, you don't want anybody, but for your team project, you might want to invite your manager, your direct reports, etc. So then it allows everyone to be on the same page. When you invite someone to a project and they go into their Protomatrix, they'll see the same thing that you see. And that's how you create alignment. Because imagine this, imagine if you could see my priorities, right? And then you realize, wait a minute, I didn't realize that Hai thinks this is high priority. That shouldn't be the case at all. Then when you have a meeting, instead of actually just, not even knowing what are the things that you should be talking about, you just project Protomatrix on the big screen and you can jump right into the most important discussion where you are misaligned, where you have disagreements. And then if everything's aligned and agreed to, then you talk about the stuff in quadrant 1, right? These are the high priority stuff that we have. These are the start items that we have. Let's talk about that first. Then when you run out of time, that's great. You've already talked about the most important things. Imagine if, you're just talking about all sorts of tasks all over the place, and then realizing afterward that you never talk about the most critical things and all the stuff that you were not in agreement to. So that's how you use Protomatrix to the fullest extent. And again, when you create tasks, make sure you set those due dates and reminders. So I think that if you use just those capabilities, you would have 80% of the value in Protomatrix with 20% of the work, right? Nothing else. Just creating that alignment within your team is already powerful. But now let me show you some of the stuff that makes Protomatrix really unique. One of them is actually our email integration. So let me show you how that works. So if you use Outlook and Microsoft Teams in general, you have to install this because we probably have the best Outlook integrations out there for prioritizing emails. Let's just say if you get an email that comes in and that email is important. this is what I do, and I still do this sometimes, which is I will flag an email, right? Sometimes you can actually set reminders on email, especially in Gmail and Outlook and so forth. The problem I have is that if I have 10 flag emails, it's fine. But if I have 100 flagged emails, I'm not going to get to them, right? Because then you're just spending all your time going through flag emails. And then again, if everything's important and urgent, then nothing is. So instead, what I can do is I would go to my Outlook here, click on apps, and click on Party Matrix. If you don't have Party Matrix for Outlook yet, click on add apps and search for Party Matrix, of course. So now I click on here and I click prioritize email. What this does is it lets me turn any email into a task in Party Matrix. Now you can see that I have the option to capture email. It takes the subject of the email as the item name, which again, I can customize. And then it chooses a project for me, right? I can actually go and change the project if needed. And then what happens is I can actually choose what quadrant it goes in. I can assign this email to the person, otherwise it assigns it to me, and I can set a due date. So within the Outlook integration, Party Matrix lets you quickly convert a task, convert an email into a task in Party Matrix, assign it to the appropriate quadrant within the appropriate project, delegate to the appropriate person with a due date, right? Then that's not something that you can do by just flagging an email. The reason is if it's something that you have to respond to within a day or two, maybe you'll remember. But if it's something you have to respond to within a week or 2 weeks or a month, you're going to forget it. The flag email isn't sufficient. And then not only that, you will not get those reminders. Again, that's different from due dates, right? So with Party Matrix, you can actually set those reminders in the delegation and ensure that you actually get to it. Me personally, I use email delegation all the time. I always need, some team members to chime in on a specific email from a client or a customer, and then afterwards, I will have a discussion inside Party Matrix. And what's nice about that is the customer doesn't have to see any of those stuff, right? This is all the internal discussion, and then afterwards I can respond to the customer confidently. So I hope that you use this capability as well, because it is so powerful as a way to ensure that your emails are not dropped. And then instead of forwarding an email to your coworker and then polluting their inbox too, I can assign it from here, and with the due date in place, everyone's on the same page. And so that's really, really useful. In fact, what I also do is actually create automatically rules inside my Party Matrix, inside my email Party Matrix. So then, for example, every email from a certain company can actually go into your Party Matrix automatically, into the appropriate matrix in the appropriate quadrants automatically, which is really neat. So for example, all my Microsoft emails or my emails from Microsoft goes into my Microsoft project. And I just click capture email. And then the moment I do, it becomes the item details. It's just like the item details that you saw within the web app. Again, I can set reminders, due date, start, etc. But here's the neat thing. What I can also do with Party Matrix is I can attach an email to an existing task. I haven't seen this in any other application for email management, but instead of actually just creating new emails all the time, I can actually search for an existing task, for example, and then hover over that task and attach the email to that task. So again, if you work with external clients, right, the client sends a follow-up email, you already have a task for that. You can attach that email to an existing task. Or if an executive at your company sends you an email and says, hey, could you prepare a report for XYZ, and you're already working on it, you can go and attach that to your existing task related to the report. Very, very useful. One of the neat thing about Party Matrix is that it's a universal app. It's one of the very few universal app within the Microsoft ecosystem. What that means is I can actually go to the left-hand side here inside Outlook. I can search for Party Matrix and I can add it and then actually pin it to the panel here inside Outlook. So what that allows me to do is access all of Party Matrix within Outlook. I don't even have to go to the web app. So what's really nice is, some people spend so much time in Outlook, honestly. What's nice is Party Matrix works directly from there. So you don't have to exit the software application at all. And so now you can have it here and you can access all your projects, all your tasks. Now, as you can see, when I open Party Matrix here inside Outlook, I have a different view open rather than just my matrix view. I have what's called the one-on-one view. So to get to the one-on-one, you can click on this menu and click the one-on-one, and now you get a people-centric view. What that means is that I can actually look for all the tasks I have in common with a coworker across all of my Matrix. Let me give you an example. Let's just say if you're a manager and you have 5 or 10 direct reports, at any point in time, you want to know, hey, what are my direct report person A working on, right? You don't want to go into Matrix, click on a project, find the task, look for the dates and see if they're working on that, what's active and so forth. Instead, the people-centric view, the one-on-one view, lets you select the person. It shows you all the tasks they have. It shows you everything that they have that's overdue as well as due soon, anything that they've touched recently and modified recently across all of your projects. So now when you have that one-on-one meeting, that one-on-one conversation, you can just drill down so quickly and talk about only the important things and then change the due date as needed directly from here. And in fact, you can even add share tasks directly from this view, which automatically assigns to the other person and adds you as a follower. This saves you so much time having to open an application, find a project, create a task, delegate to the person, set a due date. All of that can be done with essentially one click. Click on add share task, type in your message with the, due tomorrow or due next week or due in 5 days at 2 p.m. or something like that. And everything else is taken care of for you. Very useful. One of my favorite views. So that's a one-on-one view. And now, again, it works within Outlook. So the other thing is inside Microsoft Teams, it's the exact same deal. What you can do is inside Teams, you can go to App Store, search for Matrix. You can install it. Now it'll be on your left-hand side. You can access all of Matrix without leaving Teams, right? So again, you can use Matrix for everything that you need to do without having to go to our application. Even though we have the web app, desktop app, mobile app, etc., we want to bring Matrix to where you spend your time. Again, a lot of people spend time in Teams. A lot of people spend time in Outlook. Now, when you go to search for Matrix in the App Store in Teams, you'll see we actually have a couple of other options, one of which is actually workflow. So I'm not going to go into the details, but I want you to know that Matrix has a lot of automation tools as well as deep integrations within the Microsoft ecosystem that like Power Automate and Graph and all that, that allows you to create all sorts of rules. I mean, this is the kind of stuff where if you were a business or enterprise customer of Matrix, you can customize a lot of stuff that creates rule for you to import data or create tasks when you do basic functionalities. The other thing too is Microsoft launched Copilot recently, and Matrix is one of the very, very first companies that actually works with your Microsoft AI. So if you're an enterprise customer of Microsoft, definitely check out Matrix for that too. Again, none of this is necessary from day one, but I want you to know that Matrix works out of the box within the entire Microsoft ecosystem. If you go to a chat inside Teams, one of the neat things is you can actually add that one-on-one view directly here. So if you have 5 or 10 coworkers you're chatting with all the time in Teams, simply add the one-on-one view. And then now you can go and see all the tasks you have in common with them in Teams without, again, having to go to Matrix and opening the one-on-one. To add that one-on-one tab, just click on this plus here, choose Matrix, and then choose the one-on-one. As you can see, you can also include read-only versions of Matrix projects inside your team's conversations. A use case there is, let's just say, you have a particular initiative, but you want other people within the organization to know, but you don't want them to edit your project. You can actually do that within Teams as well. Okay. One of the things I want to talk about quickly is we talk about reminders and notifications and so forth. So Matrix has a chat bot inside Teams that actually will send you reminders, because I talk about how you set due dates and reminders. Well, that's what this is for, right? So you saw how I set some reminders earlier. Well, check this out. I'm getting reminders inside the chat bot to let me know, by the way, I got to work on this task and so forth. But if you go to Matrix itself, there's a little home icon here. And by the way, this is where you should start your day with Matrix. When you go to this home view, you'll see all the alerts that requires your attention. That means these are items that were assigned to you. These are items that you assigned to somebody else but was updated. These are items where you set due dates and now they're due, or you set alerts and so forth. So that's how you get this list of items. So for me, when I start my day, I look at this and see, hey, is there anything here that's relevant to me? I click through it and edit it as needed. And then when I'm done, I clear all notifications and now I'm on a blank slate. And by the way, this is how those recurring reminders come in to help you, because again, this happens to me every day. I have a lot of notifications from reminders, but because I create notifications for all my important tasks, even if I clear them, the next day, my daily recurring reminders will start popping back up again, and I'll see it on my list, and I get back to it, and I can actually work on it. So that's a really, really good trick. I can't emphasize that enough because I think it is so immensely useful, and it's the way to beat our brain, because our brain is always focused on those urgent things, not those important things. And so by combining Party Matrix quadrants along with reminders, you achieve both. Okay, so the last thing I want to mention is that Party Matrix is available again within so many other platforms, including Gmail, including Chrome, including Edge, allowing you to actually convert any websites, any SharePoint view page into task inside Party Matrix. We also have connectors that pull in your tasks from Microsoft To-Dos, Planner, and so forth. And then I do want to mention that, for those who are actually considering enterprise or business license for Party Matrix, we actually provide coaching as well as technical support to do a lot of other automations as well. So if any of those things cross your mind, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to discuss that. With that, I'm going to jump back to my presentation and wrap things up here. Okay, so what success with Party Matrix should look like? 1, you have a central place to track all your priorities. 2, everyone on the team understands and are aligned on key tasks. 3, repetitive procedures are templatized and saved on future work, and that your important emails are prioritized and triaged to the proper team members and never forgotten. Party Matrix is a communication tool. What that means is it helps you communicate to everybody else what your priorities are, and it helps everyone else communicate to you what their priorities are. And if you just go and write down your most important goals, as I mentioned, your personal priorities, your team priorities, your goals for 2024, some key initiative that you work on, and then whenever you have a meeting, project Party Matrix on the big screen and talk through it, you're going to find a tremendous amount of value with the software right away. And then make sure you set those due dates, make sure you set those reminders, and then everything else will fall into place. Party Matrix started out as a software for individual to manage their priorities. So that's our roots. So when you think about Party Matrix, make sure that it's successful for you in particular, because if it's successful for you, it'll be successful within your team and then within your organization. So I highly, highly recommend that you really make sure that you're achieving these goals with Party Matrix, because if you're not achieving these goals that I highlighted here, then that means you're not using Party Matrix to the full potential. But one of the things I want to emphasize is that, we want to ensure that you're successful. So reach out to us if you're struggling with anything. And by the way, that's what these webinars are for. They're designed to be recorded so you can watch them later as needed to get your tips and tricks if you forget how to use a certain feature and so forth. And don't forget, we also have other webinars on email management and on templates and so forth. And we're actually launching a whole series on other capabilities. Okay, with that, I finished my presentation. I'll take a look to see if there's any questions within the chat, and if there is, I'll answer them. Thank you. Okay, question is, what type of reports can I get from the software to get an overview of projects? That's fantastic. So let me show you how that works. So here, I'm going to go back to Party Matrix. Couple of things. One, let's just say I'm going to choose a project here, okay? And within this project, there's a couple things I can do. As you can see, the quadrant names are different. And then when I select that project, I have the matrix view here. I can actually click on the list view to see within the list. List view is very useful if you want to see items that are overdue. And then you have the timeline view, and then you have the Gantt chart view here. And the Gantt chart view is a way for you to see how things play out over a long period of time. And then from here, you can print this out or save it as a screenshot that you can put into your presentation. So the Gantt chart is created on a per project basis. It's created automatically just based on the information that you put when you create tasks, and you link them together, and you can choose this task, block this task. This task is dependent on this task, etc. So that's what you can do directly in the Gantt chart. So this is within the project. But the other thing you can do is actually go to what's called the search view. And within the search view, you can actually filter across your entire Party Matrix for all sorts of information. If you click on filter here, you can say, show me the things that are finished in quadrant 1, assigned to me, and then you can choose various dates or whatever. It searches all of your Party Matrix, and then you click on this view here, you choose select all item, and then you can export this as CSV, or you can email the item, or you can print the item. So imagine if you're a manager and you want to know, hey, what are all the things my direct report Sue did in the previous quarter, right, across whatever project, you can actually go to here and you can build all of those. So that's pretty much how all you got to do, which is you go and do the filter as needed. The other thing you can do with Matrix is what's called the workload reports. So if you go to general report here, I'm sorry, right here, you can go to workload management report. What this does is it actually shows you the number of tasks each person has on a specific date. This is so useful if you're bringing on a new project and you need to assign to somebody and you want to know, hey, who has capacity, who doesn't. And from this view, you can actually see the number of tasks they have within any specific time period. You can click on this to drill down as needed, and you can actually reassign it to other people, or you can actually assign new tasks to those individuals as well. So Matrix has all sorts of views that lets you see all that data. Now, we don't have a Gantt chart across all projects, so that's not something that we have. We used to support that. That might be something that'll come in the future, but inside Matrix, you do have the calendar view across all of your projects, but that's something that that is available today. The other thing is you also get what's called general reports, where on a daily basis, you can, or daily, weekly, quarterly basis, you can get reports emailed to you to talk about various progress. So we work with some enterprise customers where, the executive team actually gets a report from Matrix on Sunday evening across all the projects, right? And so you can get all sorts of custom reports as well. The information is there. So how you want to deal with it is up to you. Can you assign an anticipated length of time to a task? Yes, you can. So that's called effort. So let me show you how that works. So let's just say if I go back to my project here, right? When I set a due dates, reminders, next to that, I have the option to set effort. And so here I can say something takes an hour, 2 hours, half a day, etc. So the idea is not to be so granular because we're not a time tracking tool, but you can go and say, this task will take half a day. And then later when you run the workload report, you can actually see how much effort someone is spending. So for example, not all tasks are created equal, right? Someone might have 6 hours worth of work. Someone else might have, one task might be 6 hours or one task might be 1 hour. And so you can actually run reports based on effort. You can also set effort manually by typing, set effort for 4 hours here in the chat. And so what our system does is actually, again, uses natural language to understand that. And so when you talk about dates, you can actually do multi-days or all days as well, but there's a difference between dates versus effort. And so if you want reports on the amount of time to get something done, that's what effort is for. So we actually have ways where, again, if you're really into time tracking and you do use a lot of effort and you need specific reports and so forth, that's something you can reach out to us, and that's just something that we offered custom reports for our business customers. Great questions. Are there any other questions? One of the things I want to mention too is, reach out to me if you have any specific feedback. I've talked to thousands of customers across every single industry and every single vertical across the world. So I've seen quite a bit. So that's one of the things that I want to bring to the table, which is my wealth of knowledge, especially around the use cases of Matrix, so I can actually show you how to use it for every single use case that you can possibly imagine. We use Matrix at our organization for everything that we have. I actually can't imagine prioritizing my tasks without it. So that's just something that I've gotten really familiar with. Thank you very much for your time here today. Reach out to me again if you have any feedback. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you all. If you do have a question, go ahead and just type it within the chat there. I see that. See that someone raised. Yes, absolutely. So this webinar is recorded, and I'll post the webinar shortly after. And then after that, you can share with your cohort for sure. And I highly recommend watching the webinar if you have any questions around features as well. But definitely that'll be sent out. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for the questions. And I saw that someone raised their hand. You go ahead and just type it in the chat if you can. And then if I do miss it, please send me an email afterwards and I'll look into it. So I'll wait for a few seconds here and then I'll sign off. Perfect. Thank you all. Bye-bye.